The collection tubes, we've been partnering with Oak Ridge National Lab, a Department of Energy lab based in Tennessee. They have very unique and sophisticated injection molding manufacturing capability, and they are in the process of ramping that up to create collection tubes, and they will be ramping up to over 40 million collection tubes a month here over the next several weeks. In addition to the swabs, we believe that as testing progresses, there'll be other types of testing like serological testing that will occur. And those samples have to be collected in different ways. So many times, some of those tests will require a finger prick. So in addition, we've secured over 17 million lancets, which is what you use for the finger prick, so that we have those available, as well as 17 million alcohol swabs, which is what you need to clean the finger before you do the finger prick. In addition, although folks are not talking about this much yet, we also believe that businesses across the country may want thermometers to test folks as they come into the office. And so we've secured over 650,000 infrared thermometers that states and businesses will be able to access to be able to test folks as they come into work. So I think we've made tremendous progress on the collection side. In addition to the collection side, we've been very focused on ensuring that the labs have what they need. To process a specimen in a lab, you really need two things. You need something called an extraction kit, and you need something called a PCR test. In order to be able to fully process a test, you need both of these things. Sometimes these things come together, and sometimes they come separate. For some of our point of care tests, including the Abbott and Cepheid tests, they come together. They are ramping up production rapidly to over 3 million of those tests per month, and these are tests that did not exist even a month ago. The second piece is on some of these large machines. They also sell complex cartridges that come together. One of the big manufacturers is that has already ramped up production from about 1.6 million a month to more than twice that already, and that's already occurred. In addition to when they come together, they also sometimes come separate, and we see significant ramping up of production there from our manufacturers through our public-private partnerships, and we're seeing both several million more over the next few weeks of both the RNA extraction kit as well as the PCR test kit. So with that, thank you.
Mike, please. Thank you, Brett.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I share your admiration for this remarkable team, from the Army Corps of Engineers to Brad to Admiral Giroir. They're doing a remarkable job every day. As President mentioned, today we had our weekly conference call with governors across the country, states and territories, and I was able to convey to them our appreciation for the leadership that every governor of every state and territory has provided. Thanks to their leadership, thanks to the extraordinary cooperation of the American people, despite the fact that more than 770,000 Americans have contracted the coronavirus, and our hearts grieve for the more than 41,000 Americans who've lost their life. The truth is that as we stand here today, we are slowing the spread. As the President reflected, we continue to see steady progress in less cases, lower hospitalizations, even in hotspots around the country. And we commended America's governors for their efforts in that regard. We are preserving our healthcare capacity, as the General with the Army Corps of Engineers reflected. The President's direction, we've built a great number of hospitals around the country, but the utilization rate has been fairly low because of the mitigation efforts, the cooperation of the American people. We have not had to use them. And that, as the President said, is very good news. In a word, we thank the governors across the country for taking actions, decisive action, to save lives and to make a difference. I reminded them that we're all in this together. We have one mission, we're one team. We spoke on the conference call about last week's guidelines to open up America again. And we heard from governors across the country about the progress that they're making. We spoke to governors from New Jersey, Connecticut, Florida, Louisiana, Texas, and Michigan about their ongoing efforts at social distancing, and addressed questions that they had about needs that have been spoken of already in this presentation today. In addition, as we promised last week when we spoke to governors on Thursday about the guidelines to open up America, our team presented every governor in the country, states and territories, with a memorandum detailing laboratory capacity in all locations of laboratory equipment for diagnostic tests that can perform the coronavirus test. We also provided, as Dr. Burks will elaborate in just a few moments, literally a map about where these testing devices are located. And I must tell you, Mr. President, I was very impressed at the way governors, as we speak, are scaling testing in their own states using these resources. Our hope is that by providing this information, and by our team that we've enlisted out of Walter Reed, that's contacting every one of the laboratories in the country to find out what their needs are and to encourage them to activate those testing machines to do coronavirus testing, that will continue to be able to support a state-managed effort to increase testing even more. But a few highlights: Governor Doug Ducey announced antibody testing for 250,000 health professionals this week and first responders, a partnership between the state and the University of Arizona. We spoke today about Governor Gavin Newsom's announcement that he set up a task force for testing, 5 to 7 high-capacity testing hubs in partnership with UC San Diego and UC Davis to increase testing in high-capacity labs around the state of California. We heard from Governor Ron DeSantis, Mr. President, about the efforts of the state of Florida. I believe he said that at this time Florida had conducted 275,000 coronavirus tests, and they're in the process of a major expansion of statewide testing with the goal of opening up additional sites and using the Florida National Guard to test residents at nursing homes and long-term care facilities in Florida. We also recommended today to every governor's attention the public health website that the state of Florida established, which has useful information on a county-by-county level about where testing is happening. Mr. President, as you said, governors are utilizing testing assets. They're managing and deploying these resources as they see fit. And at your direction, we're going to continue to work very closely with them. Other governors that we spoke with included Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan. There are 13 new or expanded coronavirus drive-through testing sites in Michigan that her team has stood up with Michigan Primary Care Association, and we assured her that we would continue to work as Brad and Admiral Giroir are literally working around the clock to make sure that they have the supplies to support all of that testing. As the President said, Governor Hogan, who always begins our conference calls as he's chairman of the National Governor Association, expressed appreciation for last week's guidelines to open America up again, and his appreciation on behalf of all the governors for the list of laboratories in each individual state. He did raise the issue that we had included on the list Department of Defense facilities that have laboratories and machines, and also other federal facilities, many of which are in Maryland. And I was able to assure Governor Hogan and every governor on the call that we will make all of those laboratories available across the country to every state as the need for testing capacity continues to scale. And so this is one more step where you see the Army Corps of Engineers, where you literally see thousands of military doctors and nurses on the streets of New York and other cities around the country. This is one more step where we're literally, as the President said from early on, are leaving no stone unturned, and we are delivering a whole of government approach for our states as they deal with the coronavirus outbreak. Governors are continuing to expand testing, and we assure them that we're going to continue to work in every way to support their efforts to do just that. I will say again, as we've said before, as Dr. Burks comes up to explain to you what we delivered to the governors today, we told the governors once again today that by our best estimates, we have enough testing capacity today for every state in America to go to phase 1, if they meet the other criteria of 14 days of reduced cases and sufficient hospital capacity to prepare for any eventuality that may occur. Once again, we have enough testing capacity for every state in America to go to phase 1, but we assured the governors today that we're going to continue to work around the clock to expand the testing capacity, support supplies, and to support their efforts to encourage social distancing and the very mitigation efforts that the American people have been doing that have brought us the progress that we see all across the country today. With that, Mr. President, I'll just let Dr. Burks describe what we distributed today.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, Mr. President. We just want to show you a couple of additional slides, but also to remind all of Americans that we still have a significant number of cases, both in the Boston area and across Massachusetts and Chicago, that our hearts go out to those cities as they continue to struggle with coronavirus and the consequences of the hospitalization, to all the healthcare providers that are on the front lines. We wanted, so these are just an illustration of the different types of equipment that are out there, describing them both as low speed, but quick turnaround time, to high speed and taking 3 to 4 hours to actually run 100 or more tests. And so the equipment ranged from all those different, and that's why there's 5,000 of them as noted by the president in this list. We wanted every governor and every state and health laboratory director to have a clear understanding of the full capacity within the state, both for the capacity, but also where technical assistance and additional supplies may be available. And we were proud to put the federal labs on that list because the military and the VA have stepped up every step of the way to provide support both in testing and care. And we have many military members on the front lines, and I'm sure the military would offer their facilities to the governor of Maryland or any governor who wanted to utilize those to expand testing. So next slide, I'm just going to run through them very quickly. So every governor not only received the Excel spreadsheet with the complete list of the equipment and the zip code of the location and the laboratory to really be able to create a mosaic of laboratories of the high speed and low speed equipment together to meet the needs of their clients, depending if they're drive-through or hospital needs. So this is what Florida looks like. Next slide. This is what Louisiana looks like. Next slide. Maryland with significant capacity. Next slide. Virginia with significant capacity throughout the state. Next slide. New York, obviously a lot of capacity in New York City with overlapping capacity. It's important to know where this is because then hospitals and labs can support each other when they need surge capacity. Next slide. This is New Jersey. Next slide. Pennsylvania. Next slide. Massachusetts. Next slide. Ohio. Next slide. Oklahoma. Next slide. Washington. Next slide. I think that's Wyoming. So we wanted to show both in states that have large populations and in states that have lower populations. You can see that in general, the number of machines match their population. And we're working with the Walter Reed Group and the American Society of Microbiologists and all the lab directors to really create a web of understanding of what the capacity is currently, what the capacity can be, and how the federal government can support them in developing their strategies linked to the overarching federal strategy of testing as outlined in our guidelines. Thank you, Mr. President.
Question for Dr. Burst.
Yeah.
Dr. Burst, University of Southern California and the LA County Public Health put out a report today that suggests that the penetrance of the virus is as much as almost 40 times what it was believed to be, that as many as 442,000 people in LA County may have been infected, which suggests two things. It suggests that you have a lot more people out there who could be spreading the virus, but it also suggests that the case fatality rate is more in line with the 2017-2018 flu than what we've seen in some other areas of the world. I'm wondering if you've seen that, what your thoughts are.
So we're looking at all those studies very carefully, and I think you will remember over the last 3 weeks I've been talking about the level of asymptomatic spread and my concern about asymptomatic spread because with flu and other diseases, when people are sick, it's easy to contact trace. When people are not sick and shedding virus, you have to have a very different approach, a very different sentinel surveillance approach, a sentinel monitoring approach, which we outlined in the guidelines. And it's why the guidelines took that very seriously. We knew that was unique for respiratory diseases, but it was because we were very concerned about the level of asymptomatic. And if you remember, we talked about younger age groups may have more asymptomatic disease, and your asymptomatic disease may decrease with your older age groups, and that your symptomatic disease might increase with age groups. This is still our working hypothesis. We have no data right now still to support that, but it's these kinds of studies that help that. We know that New York and Detroit and other cities are very interested, which we want to also support them in, testing frontline responders, first responders, and healthcare workers, because we think their exposure may have been the greatest. What we don't want to do, and I'm just going to do another 30 seconds on testing. These tests